Thank you all for coming. Turns out we have a fairly busy agenda tonight. Who knew? And I've spent the last couple of hours trying to figure out a way to get it to be as smooth and pain-free as possible, because there's two parts to it. We have a warrant responsibility, as those of you on the Finance Committee know, to look at the capital improvement plan for the town, and then next month have a public open meeting that summarizes our perspective and recommendations, and then produce a report for the town administrator and the select board by December 1st, which we did last year. So that's the bad news in a sense, because it sounds like a lot of heavy lifting, but the reality is, because of COVID and because it's a 5-year plan, much of what was in the plan last year just got pushed forward a year. So I've been spending the last couple of hours looking at last year's plan and this year's plan, and there's an awful lot of commonality. And if we review our recommendations from last year, unless we've changed our mind in a significant way because of circumstance, we may be able to get through a significant number of line items just by saying, well, yep, we've seen this before, and all that's happened is that it's been bumped a year. In addition to that, and I don't know how long this will take exactly, hopefully nothing will take a ridiculous amount of time. I invited Miriam Spencer to be on the line. Thank you. Hi, Miriam. And Maria Broadbent, our new town administrator. I'm fairly certain not all of you have met her before. She's in the box marked Miriam Broadbent. And it's funny that you see people in their boxes.
Like Hollywood Square.
I don't know if Mike Travato's online or not. I don't see him, but he may be as well.
Yes, he's there.
Hi, Mike. So Mike is the assistant town administrator, and among other things, I asked them to attend, in part because I hope it becomes a tradition that one or both will attend our meetings. But there's been an awful lot of there've been a lot of events and a lot of things going on with town finance over the last 3-4 months. Not the least of which was the transition from a previous town administrator to our current one. And I don't know how up to date the Finance Committee is member to member on those events. And I thought it would be really useful to kind of go through at least the highlights, including issues related to cash flow, which Miriam will speak to, and issues related to seasonal revenues and the budget process going forward, which I hope Maria and Mike can speak to. I see a couple of department heads are also on the line. Thank you for attending. So without further ado, the agenda starts with a review of the minutes. I don't know if I hope everyone has had a chance to review the minutes from our last meeting on September 10th.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I was wondering if you wouldn't mind doing the piece that Miriam is here for, the discussion of ongoing issues. If you consider doing that before the capital budget, just out of respect for her time, because she doesn't really need to be here for the capital improvement piece.
You're fading in and out, Maria, but yes, I would be happy to do that with the hope, and that's the fingers crossed right there, that it doesn't engender a deep dive into questions that consume a lot of time, because the primary reason tonight is to get through the capital improvement plan per our schedule. So I am inclined to push a few things off to the end, just because if we don't do the deepest dive on them, we will at some point in the future. But yeah, after we do the minutes, I'm happy to give Miriam the floor, if you're prepared, Miriam, and then we'll go through those questions. Okie doke. So, and thank you for that suggestion, because it was one I was kind of wrestling with before anyway, how to make this move as smoothly and as considerately as possible. If there are no objections, I would take a motion to approve the minutes from September 10th.
So moved.
Second,
We'll do the roll call. I don't know if the order is going to be as I see you on the screen, but Jeff, you're the first person I see on the screen. So,
Aye.
okay, I'll say aye. Linda? I don't see Linda. I hope she's okay. Kathy?
She's there. She's just muted.
Oh, Linda?
Yes, aye.
Okay. Kathy?
aye.
Woody?
Yeah, good.
Jen? Jen, are you muted as well?
Yeah, can you hear me? I'll
And
abstain.
now, is that an I or an A?
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't there.
Good plan. Stephen, no,
Yes,
I'm sorry, I
aye.
think I keep Bob there as well. Bob?
He's just muted and I tried to unmute him, so he's gonna have to unmute himself.
Aye.
Okay, so it looks like we are unanimous. If I've got the right count, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Am I getting 8 here?
There are 8, yes.
Okay, 8-0. Thank you. All right, so having dispensed with the minutes, Miriam, if you're unmuted, that would be fine. If I might, my understanding of this question, and this is one of the questions that's in the agenda for tonight as well, is that because we had a delay on town meeting and because town meeting usually leads to our ability then to set the tax rate, get the tax bills out, that process was delayed by 5 months, I guess. And as a consequence of that, revenues from taxes are delayed as well. And as a consequence of that, cash on hand is being limited at all times, is what's available at present to pay the town's bills while we reconcile the question of getting the tax rate done, which Miriam has been working on, and then get the tax bills out and gets tax revenue in. Is that a fair, quick summary?
I'd say it's fair. I would say that the delay in the tax bills is less due, although it was a factor, the delayed town meeting. But I think our former town accountant was really struggling with his part in that. And that was what caused me to raise the alarm that the process was just not moving along at a good pace. And I think that may have precipitated some of the actions that were taken. At present, I am working with Rich Bienvenu, who's the Assistant Town Administrator and Finance Director in Eastham. We have him on loan. And he has 30 years of municipal finance experience. He's been helping us with the recap and getting the data set so that we can send our submission to the state, to the DOR, and get our tax rate approved by them. He's confident that we should be able to do that in the next week. And then it's in the state's hands. He doesn't think that will take very long, which means up to 5 days or so. And at that point, it comes back to town hall. The assessor and the collector will, what they need to do to make sure that the bills are what they should be. And they go to our vendor who actually processes the bills and sends them out, which can take up to 2 weeks. So we're looking at probably middle of November for that process and for the bills to actually go out.
Thank you, Miriam. Could you, by the way, I had Rebecca distribute your select board letter to the committee. So everybody has access to the letter that was presented at last night's meeting. The select board, just so you know that. Some of the questions that have come up relative to the process we're going through have related to timing, I guess is the best way to express it, which is how much time do we have till we run out of money? One, how much time will it take to actually get the tax bills out, which you just talked to? And then how much time from that point will we see a sufficient amount of revenue coming back to have some kind of confidence that we will continue to make our payments? Some people I've spoken to have expressed concerns about the potential impact on our bond rating and so on if we were to default in any way. So that's the concern. Doesn't mean it's a reality.
Right.
Could you speak just a little bit to your sense of the timing between when we will get the tax bills out, what your expectations are for how quickly revenue will come back in? Because one of the questions has been, why are we going internal for the money rather than just going out and borrowing on a short-term basis, 2 million, 3 million, whatever is required?
Sure. Well, last night at the select board meeting, I had requested approval to do some internal borrowing to cover a school district assessment that's due on December 1st. That's $1 million plus. And that was my biggest concern in the short term, because I have to voucher that before December 1st. So we need to have the money available. And that internal borrowing will allow us to pay that bill. I worked out that an average payroll vendor warrant cycle costs us about $850,000. And with the cash we have on hand, we can pay the bills long enough for the tax revenue to start coming in. Now, the tax revenue has already started coming in. Karen Murphy, our collector, has taken in more than $75,000 in prepays. And as I mentioned last night, we just got a nice bump from the June through September rooms tax, which was over $550,000. So that buoyed us some. But when the tax bills do go out, the bulk of the money that comes in is from banks. So people's escrow accounts, and they're going to pay regardless of the COVID situation. So that is money, shall I say, in the bank, or soon to be. So my hair is not on fire anymore. And the reason we're not currently going to a short-term note is simply because under Richard Bienvenu's counsel, we have to prove to the DOR that we actually need the money, and currently we can't do that because we have cash on hand in various accounts that are accessible. So the other complication is that our accounts are in a state that it would make it hard to make that case. But from a bank account's point of view, we have the cash on hand. So it would be hard to prove otherwise. So that's why we're going internal instead of external. And that's why I think we will be able to make it until the tax revenue comes in.
Does anybody on the committee have a question for Miriam?
Well, I would just like to say thank you. That looks promising. I think if we have the cash on hand, then we should use it. And it sounds to me like you've got it under control. So thank you.
Sure, Well, I'm doing the best I can.
Sure. Can I ask you a quick question, Miriam? Do you have a sense, because I don't think the question was asked last night, of how much revenue is tied up in escrow? Such that, I mean, what's available for release from the banks once that request is made, and how long? I got the impression that the banks would be able to release that money fairly quickly. But I don't know if that's true. So that's really the question.
Well, I think the escrow accounts, I hope we're talking about the same thing. I'm talking about people's real estate taxes that will be paid through their escrow accounts.
That's what I'm talking about as well.
Right, yeah, okay. And that should be released fairly quickly once we send out the tax bills.
Well, so we get whatever it is, about 20 some million dollars, 22 million in tax relief every year, because it more or less matches the budget, right? So,
Right, that, I would say that's a little high, but yes,
well, yeah, I think it's actually closer to 18 million or whatever.
Right,
But of
right.
that, what percentage would you say is paid through escrow? through the
Oh,
bank?
I don't have that information. We'd have to ask Karen, the collector, that.
Okay.
Just a quick, if we have the bills going out in November, do we have an estimate of when the due date will be? When we can
It
expect
will
the
be
payment?
30 days after the tax bills are sent out.
So this is Kathy. I have a question and a couple of points on the timing of it. So the short term borrowing from internal is coming from the accounts that you listed in some kind of order from that we have the cash on hand from the stabilization fund and the other funds. Is that correct? Or is there one fund that it's coming from?
Well, my preference would be to tap the CPC simply because that's the biggest fund and it would be easiest for record keeping to, tap into one fund instead of multiple.
To put it back, yeah.
It really, that's not, that, like I said, that's just record keeping.
So I don't want to, I don't want to question what you do because it's what you do every day, but I'm thinking when I think of this, I'm looking at a timeline that maybe, so you have that $1 million promise for December 1st. But if we're looking at setting the tax rate for a week and then having the state get back to us with that in another week, and then have the vendor spend 2 weeks, and then tax bills, how long do they have to pay before they get them? I mean, is it a 30-day outlay? Because now you're timing on the cash, on the inflow of cash. Are we gonna fall short for a 2-week period? And if so, and we do exhaust available funds, what would be the timing on tapping into short-term borrowing? So it's just trying to cobble it together with the expectation that if something doesn't happen in the time frame and we're using an abundance of caution, so we're not caught short for a couple of weeks here or there. Because I can, with that timeline, I can totally see that possibility of being kind of short-stopped with nowhere to go for a couple of weeks. So I just want to make sure that we're avoiding that based on best projections. I'd rather go with worst-case scenarios. So.
Right. And
Okay.
I'm monitoring, I'm in our bank accounts every morning. I mean, that's the first thing I do is I check where we are with things and I'm right. So, and I know that a short-term note is going to take us, it requires a 3-week lead time. So, if we are in the position where we need to do that, I'm ready to pull the trigger. And, the longer we wait, the better position we are to prove to the DOR that we need to. So I think I'm monitoring it carefully. And I am certainly the last person who wants to be caught short.
So if a little borrowing, so if a little borrowing would make you sleep better at night, I think that that's probably advisable. But just in an abundance of what if, you know, and if we're okay 6 weeks from now, because I also see, you know, you've got the buoy from the beach, from the rooms tax, but that's not going to, you know, that's going to fall off. So I just, you know, I'm not looking at, when I look at this whole thing, I'm not looking at the shortfall being resolved in 3 months or 6 months, just because of lag time on revenues flowing into the town. So I just want to make sure that, you know, there's an eyeball on that, and that time frame is with an abundance of caution, understanding that 3 weeks now, maybe 4 weeks is with everybody working at home. So thank you. I appreciate everything that you have done and presented for us tonight.
You're welcome.
So I guess if I were to summarize before we allow you to sign off, or you can do it anyway, even if we don't allow you. Bye.
Thanks, Fred.
It seems to me sort of ironic, because there is a position between the position you've taken currently and Kathy's advice, and we are fully cognizant as a finance committee that it's whatever opinion we have, or as a group or as individuals, it's just commentary. We don't have the skin in the game that you do, for example, or that Maria has. We're an advisory board. That there is a line between where we are right now, and as I understood what you were saying, we have to be in some fairly deep poop to even justify to the DOR that we warrant a loan in order to get the loan. But then you have a 3 to 4 week period by the time you figure out you're in that deep where you have to wait. So it sounds to me like your monitoring is the critical piece to say, not only are we heading in the wrong direction, but we now have enough of a justification to go to the DOR and tell them that we've reached some sort of threshold. I don't know what their threshold is, but I imagine you'd have to make the case. Good luck.
Thanks.
Yeah, Jeff, before we move on.
I just want to ask, that 554,000 on the rooms tax, does that include the money that from the change in the law where people who rent out their homes or cottages, does that reflect that number? And how does that compare to, say, last year in that same time period?
Right. Last year it was, I believe, and I wrote this memo a couple of weeks ago, but I believe we were closer to 78,000. But the difference is that last year, this current is the first time that the law has been fully implemented. So last year, there was still the outs if you had made your reservation. I don't know if it was prior to January 1st or if there was another cutoff date. There was some squishiness as to whether people had to adhere to it or not. But this is the first full year of the rooms tax revenue. So that's why it was such a significant jump.
I guess we say go marijuana. No, thank you.
Well, thank you, Miriam. Appreciate that. It was a really good overview, and I hope everybody has a better feel for what the challenge is over the next couple of months. And the impact of it going south is something we hopefully won't experience.
I will continue to do my best.
I know you will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as much as I would love to jump to the end of the agenda to give Maria and Mike their time right now, I think with your indulgence, we have to jump to the capital improvement plan because that's the primary agenda item for tonight. If you had, I assume you all have the 2022, even though it says 2021 on the top. But the first column is 2022, so that would be the way you would know you've got the right one. On my screen, I have last year's and this year's, or this next one, side by side, so we can go section by section. Also, what we voted on last year and how we, what recommendations we made. There are a few questions in it that I came up with going through it, but a lot of it, I think, will look familiar. So does everyone have it up in front of them? I guess would be the first question.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm going to take that to be a group yes.
Yes.
So as you know, just as a quick review of the process here, it is a 5-year plan. And the way we approached it last year was to pay extra special attention to the first 2 years on the theory that those were the most real. That when you start looking at 5 years, unless you're looking at replacement of vehicles or equipment that routinely goes through cycles, which applies to some of the departments more than others, obviously, that whatever you imagine you're going to need 5 years out is subject to some change or at least modification in terms of cost. A lot of it is estimated cost and so on. So I would suggest that we do the same thing this year, that we pay special attention to the first year, FY 2022, and to some degree FY 23, because I noticed a few things that were projected out last year have been pushed back even another year. There's that. And the other thing I would suggest is that if somebody through their liaison relationship has some extra insight into a particular department, and it's good to see Chief Pauly online and Chief Hurley, because they can certainly speak to their departments if there are questions. I had the opportunity to speak to Mark Vincent today from the DPW as well. So I have a little bit of information that isn't immediately obvious from the chart. And Linda, feel free as well. I also spoke to Tom Conrad and Mary Beth Rodman the other day. So even though there is nothing in there right now for the schools, and I can provide minimal insight there. So the way I would approach this is to just go down line by line as we did last year, starting with MIS, and Maria and Mike, because you, I presume, have spoken to the department heads as well. If there's a question, if you would be willing to be the resource to answer to the degree that you have the knowledge, that would be great too. Great. So anybody have any thoughts, concerns before we start ahead? Okay then. If you look at last year's MIS, it's $50,000 a year. It was last year as well. It is a generic bucket. And we approved it last year. I assume that nothing has really changed, that this is, as it was explained to us last year, it was retiring equipment and updating software and that sort of thing. And it's a ballpark number, obviously being 50K, there's no precision to it. The reality is that it comes in, I believe, comes in less as on an annual basis, but that's the target number. Oh, one other thing I should mention as well, by the way, I think you all know this, but a capital project or a capital item, it makes it onto this list, is defined as a major non-recurring expenditure, which costs at least $5,000 and refers to tangible assets. And there are certain things that get proposed as capital improvements that don't really fall in that category. So I just wanted to mention that. So as we did last year, I'm just going to go department by department. What we're trying to do is make recommendations here. There will be a report. We can reserve our recommendation either because we don't recommend, or we can reserve our recommendation because we need more information, as we will with the schools, which I am promised will be available next month. So there's no compunction on our part to have to recommend something that we don't fully understand or agree with. But we do have to, at least for tonight, express an opinion, because that's what will go into the report that we put together next month. So anybody have any thoughts on the MIS department?
I may, Mr. Chairman, it, with a lot of folks working remotely, at least from time to time, and the computers that are in town hall are not equipped, most of them, to have meetings via Zoom. This fund has been really valuable to be able to help get folks ready to work in a different way with their computer system if they've had to. So,
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Can I call you Maria rather than Ms. Broadbent or TA or?
Please.
Okay, thank you, Maria, because you brought up a really important and interesting point that I think we're going to revisit in some departments more than others, which is the effect of the pandemic on how things get done, which I didn't mention. And regardless of whether we are certain or not, the potential for that pandemic to continue into next year and beyond and fundamentally change the way some things work, like schooling, for example. So are you suggesting that we are going to have to upgrade some of the servers or equipment at Town Hall in order to make it more Zoom efficient?
Desktop computers and such, most people don't have the ability to do Zoom from the computer that's at their desk if they needed to.
Okay.
Some of the funding's been used to upgrade those and purchase laptops where that's been necessary for people to work at home. So we're not asking for any different amount of money than we have before, but it has been a great resource to be able to help to upgrade some of the systems so that we could be more responsive during the pandemic.
Okay, thank you. With that, does anybody have any comment about the MIS budget, or can we? I'm going to suggest that with each department we just vote, unless there's a significant exception, to recommend the budget for that department. Seems like the most straightforward way to do it to me. I think that's what we did last year, and we noted our exceptions. So if there's no objection, I would take a motion to recommend the MIS budget.
So moved.
Second?
Second,
I'm gonna suggest that unless there is a reason not to, that if anyone says nay, otherwise I'm going to assume it's unanimous. Any nays? Okay, then we are 8-0 to approve. Moving on to the town clerk. I don't know, I saw the description of the storage vault shelving and the proposal for it. Last year, let me take a quick look. They had the same budget item in for the same amount of money. It just got pushed out a year. So the first year was 5750 and then 5 and 5. So it is the same item from last year, pushed out a year. The new thing is the microfilming, which was not in last year's budget. Is microfilming still even a thing? I'm going to ask anybody who might know. I thought that was like a 19th century technology.
Apparently, it's still a thing.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not being used as kind of a avatar for like digital imaging or whatever. It's actual microfilm.
I think it's
I'm gonna
converting
s-
paper to film, basically.
Yes, converting paper to film, and then and my understanding it's for some of your older, more valuable records that you want to make sure that they don't get lost in their paper form to degradation.
Exactly, or burned by mistake.
Oh yeah, but I thought the default now is to image them and store them as, PDFs or whatnot, not to actual.
Microfilm
not
is the
film.
backup, just because if some sort of technology goes down, you have to have the microfilm as a backup because they're volatile records. They're vital records. So you have to have a backup just in case technology falls through.
Okay, it's just a nit. I mean, it seems like you have to have a microfiche reader and all that, whatever. Does anybody have any comments about that would lead us to not recommend the two items associated with the clerk's department?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, second.
Second,
Anyone nay? Jeff,
I just don't get this. I mean, there's got to be so many ways using cloud technology today that's so much more secure, so much more accessible. For us to be investing in microfiche, it's like you said, I mean, is this even a thing anymore? I don't get it. I don't know.
yeah, and
Well,
that
I
really
think-
probably not a question for us to resolve, though.
I think Rebecca answered it very well in
Yeah.
that we do have to have something as a backup. I mean, you've got the faith in the iCloud, sure, but what if that goes? So the town's responsibility is to have, as Rebecca put it, these things in a place that can be retrieved. It seems archaic, but
I guess I would hope that they would do a redundant digital backup somewhere in addition to the film. But, oh, so are you still voting no?
Sure. Yeah, abstain,
Okay,
whatever.
7-1 to recommend. And thank you for your input though, Jeff, because I don't disagree. Just saying, it's like, there it is. It needs to be backed up. Rebecca explained why. It's going to be backed up one way or the other. The Shellfish Department is next.
I have a question on that and a couple of other ones on here on the pickup truck for just a procedural question.
Yep.
The pickup trucks and like the police and I know fire, police and recurring vehicles that are put on 5-year schedules. And I think if I recall correctly, this was an expenditure that went to a borrowing. Was it a borrowing? So it had to go to town meeting. So I guess I'm asking at this point, why are trucks appearing on the capital improvement plan? Why are vehicles appearing on there? Should they be either in part on new requests? Is this a new truck, or do they get placed in capital improvement because it's a replacement truck? Because it seems that we talk a lot about shellfish trucks. So just.
it's because it's a tangible asset for the town. That's why. So it shows up on the CIP and then it also goes to town meeting for a final vote.
So it does go, so this will come out as one of the borrowing items because we're gonna spend some money on it.
Yeah, before I recognize Chief Pauly, I just want to say that last year, our perspective was that this was a 5-year cost of $121,000 as it was presented to us for pickup trucks to rotate 3 trucks on a 5-year replacement basis, similar to the police department's.
Okay,
And on that basis, we were inclined to favor the request, was what we said last year.
okay, so
Yeah,
this
Chief
is
Pauly.
Right, and I'm pretty sure this truck for the Shellfish Department is one that been put off for a year.
Yes,
That's right.
the town administrator is correct because I remember the conversation. In the time that I've been here, which is almost 8 years, oftentimes these vehicles, whether it's a police cruiser or a replacement of a fire car or a pickup truck, would be taken out of the capital improvement plan and there was funding in place so it didn't have to go to a borrowing perspective. It's only been in this, to my knowledge, this current budget, this last budget, where we were concerned. I know Dan Holt was concerned about income and revenues being down when all these vehicles went to an override question. Some passed, some failed. So again, this is certainly a crazy year, and I don't have all of the information from the financial standpoint, but I know in the past we've tried to take out these smaller vehicle expenditures out of existing funding, out of free cash, and move things that way. So I'm hoping someday we'll get back to that, but that's just my input.
Thanks, Chief, I appreciate it.
I have a question for you, Maria. In last year's capital improvement plan, there were requests for pickup trucks in this budget every 2 years, basically. That was the rotating schedule. So last year it was 2021, 23, and 25. In this year's plan, there's only the one charge. It's $11,000 more than last year's, but there's no continuation beyond that. There's nothing in year 3 and year 5 that would presumably be the rotating out of a used truck and the acquisition of a new one. Any idea why Nancy didn't do that? Were you guys in touch with her at all about this?
I might be able to answer that. As you know, Mr. Chair, we really kind of had a short time window given to our department heads to produce their capital budgets. And I think that in the rush to get these out, some may not have had the opportunity to really suss out a 5-year plan within this in the short time window they had. And that may be why you may be seeing a few line items that have not showing a full 5 years worth. I know you and I had the conversation about the focus being on 22, understanding that short time window. And certainly, we could certainly have them flush out a better 5-year plan with more time. But, just in their defense, they just not have a lot of time to stretch out their budgets that way.
I guess I would have thought that the default would be just cut and paste from last year's and then just update the cost if you think. But it does stand out as being a significant change from last year. Also a considerably smaller dollar amount. It was 120,000, now it's 47. The other item from the shellfish department is the floating upweller. And last year we had questions about it that were related to the entire aquaculture strategy of the town. And I recall that Nancy, Ms. Tavetta, pulled it back in part because the dredgings had not yet happened. And there was a question about whether an upweller would even make sense if the harbor were not dredged because of the nature of an upweller and the health of the, I guess it's the spat in the upweller. I'm not sure how that's changed since we haven't had the inner harbor dredged. I guess I'm going to recommend to the committee that we hold off on a recommendation on this whole department until there's an opportunity to complete the line item 4 and we get a new,
Fred, could I just point out to you that the upweller is on FY 2023 for 34,000. So it's not in this year's.
But the upweller is for the following, is pushed back a year.
So
Right.
is that assuming then that we will have had the harbor dredged and then the request will come back to us?
We hope so.
That's
Okay.
what that's
Because
my.
I know there were some practical objections from people in the shellfish community to that upweller just existing in the budget at all. But since we don't have to worry about it since then, I would still suggest that we just reserve our opinion on the shellfish department until the trucks are fully populated.
What was on last year's budget for shellfish for the truck?
120,000. It was roughly 40,000 every 3 years. On three trucks being cycled through and the cycle repeating itself every 2 years.
So
the other
is this is this 47,000 to buy the first truck during this rollover period you're saying?
It looks that way, but last year that number was $36,495. So I think there are still questions about, one, how did it go from 36 to 47,000? And then the other is where are the other two line items or the other two charges? I don't know the answer. So I would just suggest we ask. We can reach out to Nancy and get the answer, and we'll have it by our next meeting. And we can make our recommendation then.
Okay.
I move that we delay until next, we ask for the information and delay that till next month.
So moved.
Anybody, any nays? Okay, so, and that will be an action item to get in touch with the shellfish department, and all questions will be answered. The next department is the police department. There are a couple of repeats because police cruisers do have to be replaced.
I'll move the police cruiser.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, please, I would appreciate it.
I would like to interject something that we should think about, and that is replacing the police cruisers with electric Teslas as we buy them. I spoke to the chief this morning. I've spoken to an owner of 2 Teslas. I watched a video for 20 minutes of the police department in Westport, Connecticut, which has started the process. And I think cost efficiencies, less frequency of replacing them, I think it's worth a hard look. So I'm just throw that out there as we move forward.
Does that mean the price is going to be higher? Is that what you're saying?
They're actually about the same.
Well, so it's a green initiative, so to speak.
Well, if you're gonna be by 2035 all green, you gotta start somewhere.
Exactly. Sounds good to me.
I think it's a good
I'm
idea.
going to invite Chief Hurley to speak to the capital improvement plan for the police department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have an opportunity to speak with Bob this morning about that. Obviously, something that we're definitely open to exploring. My concern at this point, where we had 2 vehicles in the Capitol last year, one was pulled out in July, the other one was voted down in September. And that was a 2013 and 14 vehicle that with the electric, there would be some infrastructure. And obviously all of this will be explored, and whether or not there's any on the state bid list for Massachusetts. And what I don't want to see is another year and a half go by and we fall 2 more cars behind. So it's definitely something we're exploring. Bob was going to send the video and I can start looking at it on the state bid list and costs. But one thing is infrastructure, and I saw an electric pad try to go behind Town Hall, and it seemed like that was like the big dig project trying to get that thing up and running. So I'm not sure if that helps or not. It's definitely something we would be interested in and looking at and exploring, but we are falling behind on vehicle replacements at the moment.
Thank you for that. I think it would also be, from your perspective, interesting to know how quickly they get from 0 to 60 and whether they are competitive with a traditional police car in terms of.
And the other-
Actually faster.
And the other thing we find out in the Cape too is repairs, which is why we've never really gone near Chevys. The nearest Chevy dealer was Exit 11 and they closed. So now it's Hyannis. So there's just a lot of combinations we'll look at, we'll explore. I already have my sergeant who deals with vehicles starting to look at it. And he definitely liked the look of it from the video.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, the select board, probably one of the next couple meetings is going to be looking at an efficient vehicle recommendation. I would love to see the approval of the vehicles for the police department and, the dollar amounts approved without getting specific into which vehicle they would need to buy.
I agree with that.
Yeah, so that it can keep going forward without sort of getting stuck on the details at this point.
Yeah, and to that point, I think it's really useful for us to express our concerns and opinions about how money is going to be spent. But at the end of the day, it's not our job to spend it. It's our job to advise on it. And I think advising that the police chief look into electric alternatives is a really good choice, but it's ultimately up to the police chief and the town to figure out the best way to implement.
Right, that's why I made the motion to approve the 100,000 for the police cruisers.
I'd like to approve the whole budget because there's only that
Sure.
amount in the first year. But could you speak, Chief Hurley, really quickly, could you speak to the $25,000 for ATVs and the $100,000 in the second year for portable radios?
I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. The ATV request, a few years ago, we started to tackle, especially Cahoon Hollow Beach, with the crowds, the drinking. And we came to find out was year 1, we got a lot of outside resource help from Howard and the Sheriff's Department. And when they came to assist in those details, they came properly equipped. And this year, due to the pandemic and departments really not releasing staff, it was incumbent upon our officers to fulfill those duties. And to be bluntly honest, it's an officer safety issue. I had one officer running down the hill with a fight between about 100, two groups, delaying the response to getting there. And I mean, the long and short, the lifeguards have the tools they need, fire has the tools they need. And if this is something where we're going to deploy officers out there, it's not, you just don't pull up and park and you walk 5 feet onto the beach. I mean, Cahoon is a expansive area and those crowds get quite large, and we only have 2 officers out there. So it's a combination of just needing the equipment and obviously a safety point to be able to get to these incidences on the beach. And as a subset, we've also had some search and rescue cases this past summer. And again, we just didn't have the equipment to be searching large areas of woods and brought in outside resources. So it's something we've never had before. And it's just a tool that we really need to be able to do some of these cases properly.
And can you speak for a moment to why portable radios would be $100,000?
And the fire chief can interject too. The state has been trying to move this project along with money, hopefully for communities, because it's not going to be a cheap venture. Right now, our current 800 portable system is dying, to be honest. And I'm hoping that we don't even have to touch a dime of that, but it's starting to get concerned that we met back in January, February with the state, and it's now almost November. We still have no word on a grant program, replacements. Some of these portables are not working. They're not working on the ocean side. So the hope is we don't touch a dime of it, but it'd be prudent not to have it in a plan and find out next year I have to spend 80, 90,000 on portables.
Is it related to line 13 in the fire department, the portable radio replacement there? Is this an integrated system between the 2 departments?
Mr. Chair, if I may, if you recall, we have put in a line item for portable and mobile radio replacement for the last 3 years. The 800 system that the police chief talks about is maintained by the state police. It is a system that has about 11 repeater sites that run basically from Bourne to Provincetown. With my current portable radio, which is a newer one, I can talk from Wellfleet on my back porch to Hyannis or to Bourne or to Provincetown. It's a repeater system. The system is well over 30 years old. It's failing. The portable radios that Chief Hurley has and that we have go back to the 1995 Olympics in Atlanta, and they're just not supported anymore by the manufacturers. And this is a major upgrade that is being supported by the state. But as the chief said, we're hopeful that grant money is coming. We're told it's coming. We're told it's already in the bank, but we haven't seen it yet. So we continue to budget for this. And the hope is that we don't have to touch it. We can turn it back to the town or only have to touch a portion of it. So that's the summary real quick.
This is the shift from the analog to the digital. Am I correct in that?
That is correct, Jeff. Yes, that's correct.
So
can we, I think the police department, can we put a motion up or did?
yeah, I'm going to entertain a motion. Do you want to make it, Jeff?
I'll make the motion to accept the police department's budget as is.
Second?
Second.
Anyone nay? Okay.
I'm not a nay, but I'd like to volunteer to do that 0 to 60 test if Chief entertain that idea. I'm in.
All right.
I would say, Chief, if folks on the energy department would be very excited to be able to help investigate. I don't know that, I think the timing is whether it's right now or a year from now, but I know those guys have so much energy into, the electric cars and so forth. So they might be able to help out in terms of the investigation.
Once we get the solar array up and running, huh?
Yeah, we could have a hook it up.
There is that. On to the fire department. Ambulance 98, the big ticket item there was
Yeah.
in last year's proposal. So it's been moved forward a year. We just heard about the portable radio replacement. Command car was in last year's proposal. And the mobile data terminals also in last year's proposal, though they were 16,000 then, they're 25 now. Aside from the fact that we don't have the other years, similar to the other situation, Chief Pauly, would you like to speak to your capital plan briefly?
If I may, you guys know me by now. I've got good news and bad news. So I was only able to put together the 2022 request because I needed a very badly vacation in Maine last week with my wife. Otherwise, I could not be held responsible for my actions if I didn't get out of here after 9 months, as much as I love this place. So I will have the 5, actually a 10-year, as we've always done. I'll do a 10-year summary sheet, spreadsheet for you, and you should have it by Friday. So there's good news and bad news. As the chair said, replacing the command car, while it was in last year's, and actually this current year's plan, it failed at the ballot. So we need to move forward. This is the 3rd time we've tried to replace this car, and it just needs to be replaced. The portable radio replacement is again what we talked about earlier. We have somewhere around, I'm going to say somewhere around $100,000 in that fund right now. I pulled it in this current budget because of COVID and trying to relax some funding requests, but we need to jump back into it. And my hope is certainly that we'll not need to use a good portion of that fund that's going to be built over 5 years and can be turned back to the town or reallocated, certainly with town meeting vote. The ambulance fund. This is a little concerning to me. 2 years ago, we had about $1 million in the ambulance fund. Right now, it's down to about 48,000. And the long and the short is that I had an agreement with Harry Turkanian when he was town administrator, and my predecessor and other town administrators had an agreement that we would always keep $300,000 in the ambulance fund to be used if there was a catastrophic failure of an ambulance and it had to be replaced. It could be bought cash on hand, that type of situation. That agreement didn't quite follow through in the last 2 years. And then from time to time, or annually, every budget, the town administrator and I would have a discussion about taking $250,000 or $300,000 out of the ambulance fund of about $1 million, and supplementing and using as income to help balance the town budget. And I've never had a problem with that. That's certainly something that we've always done. Well, unbeknownst to me, in last year's budget, the then town administrator took $540,000 out of the ambulance fund to put towards the total town budget. And then in the current budget, the town administrator took $500,000 out of the ambulance fund. And when I found out about that, I objected to it because it was, certainly out of practice, and I didn't think it was appropriate. And he disagreed, and that's where we left it. So the current ambulance fund is down to about $48,000. The other bad news part of this is that if you look at our ambulance receipts from July to September compared to last year at the same time, we're down almost $46,000. So
it's not replenishing as it used to.
It's not, well, it hasn't replenished in the last 3 months because of COVID. People are not going to the hospital. This is a conversation I have all the time with my peers, both on and off Cape. Folks that normally would go to the hospital, call for an ambulance, are hesitant to do that. Number one, that they don't want to tie up resources in their mind. Number two is they're concerned that they'll go get admitted to the hospital and maybe have an exposure of some type. So our ambulance calls are down probably about 15% or 18% compared to last year. I think this is a very short-term temporary situation. So that's one issue. The second issue is that we have not increased our ambulance rates in well over 12 years. And we're one of the lowest towns on the Cape, if not the lowest, in terms of what we charge for an ambulance call. So I'll be moving forward with some rate requests through the town administrator to the select board, probably around January. And I would anticipate that would be approved, and that we'll be able to come up to speed with our rates and so forth. Long story short, I've taken a very conservative approach to this. If even our rates, if we only bring in $25,000 a month through the ambulance fund, which I believe is a very conservative number, over 18 months, we'll be at $450,000. And then we'll have another 87,000, which I show is currently in the account. Again, our numbers and Miriam's numbers may be off because of a month in reporting. So we'll have, just north of at least $537,000 in 18 months. We need to replace this ambulance. We've always replaced it out of the ambulance fund. It's going to cost about $340,000. So by the time, if all of this is approved, by the time we get to purchasing the ambulance, once it's built, we'll have money in the fund to purchase it out of the ambulance fund. And then we'll probably have at least another $200,000 left over at minimum.
So if we had visibility into years 2023 and beyond, would we see another significantly large outlay like that in years 3 or 5 or whatever?
Well, again, the bad news is that in 2023, we have to replace another ambulance. But again, looking out forward, we would still have enough money in the fund to be able to buy these 2 ambulances over 36 months or 48 months, if you will. The bad news for the town administrator is that I would implore her not to tap this fund to balance the town budget, or not to help balance the town budget, because we've taken $1 million out of it over the last 2 years. And we've robbed it, is what we've done. And I'm not casting aspersions or making judgments, but the whole concept of the ambulance fund is to replace ambulances and medical equipment. So it is self-funding, at least in terms of purchasing the ambulance, purchasing major medical equipment. If the chief's car, has a sudden catastrophic event, we can pull 50 grand out of it and, replace the chief's car or whatever.
After you pull the chief out.
So I guess, and Maria and I haven't had a chance to really talk about this because this is very, very fluid and evolving, that, hopefully with new rooms and meals tax and medical marijuana or marijuana revenues coming in, that we can let the ambulance fund, leave it alone for a couple of years and let it replenish itself, and then go back to, again, where the town administrator can pull $300,000 or $400,000 a year out of it to help, supplement the town budget. So
Okay.
that's the long and the short with the ambulance fund.
Thank you for that. Jeff?
On the catastrophic replacement, did you mention that that's something that we are sharing with some of our neighboring towns? So, I mean, with the unlikely that multiple towns would have to replace an ambulance at the same time.
No, Jeff, I was thinking that in terms of, we have insurance in all the vehicles. But if something happened where, for whatever reason, insurance didn't cover it or didn't cover a portion of it, or we blew a motor, and that's going to cost $50,000 to replace because these are expensive diesel motors, that the ambulance fund would cover that. That's where I was going to from a catastrophic internal.
You have like a minimum that you want to try to maintain for that.
Exactly. Yes. And we've always done that up until the last, we did it up until this year when, the previous town administrator pulled another $540,000 out of it against my, to my objection.
But we got rid of those administrators. I mean,
the only, so the good news and the bad news is that looking forward down the road for the next 5 years, we'll be able to replace both the ambulances with the ambulance fund money. And the only other big expense, which you'll see in next year, not the budget we're talking about right now, but in 2022, 23, we need to replace an engine for $625,000. It was supposed to be in this year's request, but again, I pushed it off another year to try to give us some breathing room. the truck's in tough shape, we'll be able to get another year out of it. So I've been trying to move this out, but again, I apologize, and you'll see that when I forward you my my spreadsheet over that shows the next 10 years. So
That'd be engine 95, right?
that's engine 95. That's
And you
correct.
had it in last year's budget.
Yes. So the good news, the bad news again is that we can buy both ambulances out of the ambulance fund as long as that fund is able to recoup, and then we'll have to borrow for the engine replacement. And then we're out actually we're probably out 8-10 years on any other major replacements of apparatus. So
What I'm going to recommend here is that since we recommended the budget last year, and since Chief Pauly has gone to such lengths to explain what we might be anticipating, even though it isn't fully populated yet, that we go ahead and tentatively recommend the fire department capital budget pending any catastrophic surprises that haven't been explained, which we're not anticipating.
Yeah, I'll move that.
Yeah.
I'll move that.
A second?
Okay.
Anybody says no to that? Nay? Any nays? All right, so thank you, Chief Pauly. Approved 8-0.
thank you very much, folks. I do appreciate it.
And we
Thank you, Chief.
appreciate you too. Thank you. We have the rec department next, line 16 and 17. Again, it's only for 2022. Neither one of these items were in last year's budget. They are adding an adult fitness station at the rec areas and resurfacing the basketball courts. No, I'm sorry, the basketball court line item was there last year. Oh, they were both there last year. What am I talking about?
Have we seen these before, Fred?
Yes, we have. And actually, in last year's budget, there was nothing beyond those either. So this represents last year's budget moved forward a year with nothing behind it at the moment. So there is no further projection by the rec department on capital requests beyond 2022. Let me just verify what we thought last year. So again, having no particular opinion, I'm willing to listen to what anybody has to say about it. I have no idea whether basketball courts need to be resurfaced or not. And Maria or Mike,
Well,
any conversations around this?
yeah, if I can just, Mr. Chair, just according to Becky's request sheet, the Mayo Beach basketball courts were last resurfaced in 2009. And she says that the courts require repair and resurfacing every 10 to 15 years. So we're obviously 11 years into that.
So in theory, we have 4 years grace, but maybe not. I haven't been on that basketball court in forever, so
Yeah.
I don't know how cracked or messed up they are.
So Fred, can I
Yes, please.
jump in?
Yes, Kathy.
So after hearing, and I'm looking down the budget again, and after hearing, I have a couple of concerns, and one of them is to the entire budget when we're hearing that, the town is, because of revenue inflows and timing outflows, that we're having, issues to kind of rob Peter to pay Paul to move from one pocket to another, is a concern. And when when we just found out that the ambulance fund has been removed and repurposed into other funding initiatives over the past couple of years, I, as a general statement, am concerned about things like adult fitness recreation areas and basketball resurfacing, but not to be, and I understand there's short money, but my concern is not just because of that, but it's also COVID and nobody can be using those, and we don't know what they look like in the future as far as adult fitness, distancing, and things like that. So I would move, I don't think it's the right time to look at adding equipment that may not be used because of current COVID shutdowns, and also spending any kind of money on something that is not essential when we're not replacing vehicles and we have an ambulance fund that may not be replenished for a year and a half. So just my general thought on the overall tenor of the budget.
So let me say this about that. I think I agree with you. We had a similar concern when we were reviewing the budgets last winter, and we ended up not recommending the playground upgrade at the elementary school because we didn't know what the impact of COVID was going to be on play and being outdoors in a school situation, which turned out, I believe you raised that point as well. And it was a valid point at the time, and it turned out to be prescient in terms of how things actually worked out. I'm very comfortable reserving our recommendation on the 2 rec requests, pending a better sense of how finances work out over the next 3-4 months. We will be meeting with the rec department in the winter or early spring, and there's nothing about these requests that requires us to say yes at this point, as opposed to, I think, the urgency of saying, well, we have to have police cars or we have to have fire trucks. So unless someone
Right.
disagrees strenuously, I would entertain a motion to reserve our
Fred,
opinion.
before you go there, could I just,
Yes, Stephen.
why don't we just make the recommendation to move them to FY 2023? And then put it off till next year. The concern I have about the basketball court is when I was down there this weekend going for a walk, there were people using it. So, I mean, the adult fitness station thing, I don't think so. But why don't we just move it to, can we make the recommendation that we move those 2 items to FY 2023?
We can. It would be a separate vote, and I'm willing to entertain that as well. I don't know if anyone has a strong opinion about it one way or the other. Discuss amongst yourselves here, because if you want to move it to 2023, I think it has much the same effect. I think we
Well, I'd
all,
go even
I'm
so
hearing
far
that we
to-
all agree that it doesn't seem essential right now.
Good way to put it off. I
Right.
think we should move on and make the motion.
Okay, Stephen, you want to make that motion?
I just made the
I
motion.
just did
Chris.
Oh.
second.
What, Ian, you're seconding. So I think we probably want to go person by person here, just to be sure. Jeff?
I'm in favor of
The
Stephen's.
motion is to suggest to the Recreation Department that they defer these 2 purchases until 2023.
I vote aye.
I say aye. Linda? Linda? Linda, you still muted?
I think I am. Aye.
Okay, that's 3 ayes. Woody?
Yeah.
Jen? Jen?
Aye.
Okay. Stephen, I'm assuming you're aye.
Yes.
Oppose it. Kathy?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Okay, 8-0 to recommend deferring these costs to 2023. Thank you. Number 18, beach, portable repeaters. Didn't we just vote on that at town meeting and approve it? Or is this a different portable repeater? It was in last year's budget. I looked up, it appears to have been item 2V, unless it's a different set of portable repeaters, but I believe it's the same thing. And
If I may, Mr. Chair, it's the fire chief.
yes,
So the current, we've always, you are correct. There was $40,000 that was approved at town meeting, and I think it came out of the beach fund, I believe, if memory serves me correct. The current portables are UHF portables that the lifeguards use. They're problematic. They're spotty. We spent a day testing a portable repeater system on all 4 beaches, which worked exceptionally well for the first time in the history of the town of Wellfleet. But that portable repeater system that we tested is about twice the cost of what we originally thought. So what will happen is that, and I've talked with the beach director, we're still sorting this out, but potentially when you go to the 800 system, as opposed to the UHF system that they're currently on, it's about twice as expensive. It's just the cost of technology, it's the cost of the portables. But the benefit of the 800 system, if we provide that portable repeater system to the lifeguards, is that they can talk directly to both the police department and the fire department on our frequencies. So it kind of cuts down the middleman, if you will, and it just really enhances their ability to communicate in an emergency situation. So
So this is the other shoe dropping. This is,
I believe that's the case. I believe that's the case, yes.
so is it reasonable, since there's no follow-on in the beach line item, to assume that that is it, that 80K gets it done? Or is there more beyond?
No, I believe that'll get it done. Again, I'm not the radio expert. I know enough to be dangerous about it, but in all my years, as a fire chief and purchasing radios and upgrading radio systems, I believe that this will get it done.
I know we bought into the requirement for the portable repeaters last year, and there wasn't a lot of debate about the necessity for them. But last year it was positioned as a 40K outlay. Now, if it had been an 80K outlay, maybe we would have had different questions. If it's more than 80K, then we might have other questions.
Sure, and I totally respect that. We thought that the 40K, it will work, but it doesn't work to the extent that the 80K outlay will work, in terms of, again, enhanced reception and clearly enhanced transmissions right directly to fire and police personnel as we're responding to the scene. So,
okay.
My strong recommendation is that the board approve this. I'm sorry, the FinCom approve this. Thank you.
Do we know what the longevity is for the system?
Well, again, the current system we're on is over 25 years old. So, I think that may be a very ambitious time frame, because again, these radios, these systems, they're subject to, they're only used maybe 6 to 7 months a year in the summer season. They're constantly exposed to salt, sand, the beach conditions, which are very, very tough. But I would think we would get easily at least 10 to 12 or 15 years out of that system, easily, I would think.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to recommend that we recommend this purchase, but with the qualification that we believe, or we are assured, that this finalizes the system. That our best information is that this is a necessary addition, but that it is the final addition. Does that make sense?
Either we recommend or we don't recommend. We don't put conditions on recommendations.
All right.
So.
Well, then I guess I would. Well,
Can we ask them to come back and vote on this for next month? I just don't understand, if we already approved the 40, I hear what Chief Polly is saying. But I'd just like to know, there's just, it doesn't seem right that we're coming back and kind of paying this, doing it again. I mean, I'd just like to get a little more information. Can we delay this till next month?
we could, but someone's going to have to do the research, Jeff, to find out what the actual technology is and why it's justified.
So could I ask a question? So last year we approved the 40,000, that went to town meeting and that was approved, right?
That's right.
Okay, so this is an additional 40,000?
Right. This is
Okay,
to enhance the system to make it more effective as a
for enhancements. Yeah, I do think I would go with Jeff's recommendation.
I mean, I'll follow up. I guess it's with the beach department and just try to find out. I'm just trying to get an understanding. It just.
No, that's fine. I don't mind deferring it if someone is willing to go and ask the questions so that we actually have information at the next meeting and we're not.
I'll
going
take
through
that
this
on. I think I'm supposed to be the liaison to the beach, so I'll do that.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, so we'll defer that one. The Maria, I'm going to ask you or Mike, this $200,000 boat is a new item. It wasn't in last year's budget. And there's not it says an emergency vehicle or emergency vessel. So that suggests urgency, but I don't really know much about it. And I don't know if anyone else does.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not seeing my sheet for that one. Mike, do you know if that's the primary?
There was no sheet for it, by the way. It was not in the package.
Yeah, this was submitted by the Assistant Harbor Master. they're long overdue to replace their main rescue vessel, the vessel that they send out, quite frankly, to sea every time that they get any kind of a distress call or mutual aid assistance out on the water. And they cover a wide range geographically out on that water, as I'm sure you all know, especially in aiding other communities, where there's not a harbor master, in between. And they go out in quite adverse conditions a lot too. I think anyone who knows the Bay Area understands what it's like on a rough seas day. This has been a long overdue, and I think that my understanding is that the retiring harbor master was resistant in the past to spending money on capital equipment. And the two items that you have on this request for this year are both long overdue, forklift being the other one. And having inspected both pieces of equipment, I certainly can testify that they definitely need it. This vessel is definitely an upgrade from what they have right now. It's much more than just a plain center console for that price. But it's a little more state of the art. It's 25 foot. It's not a totally enclosed cabin like you might see on some Coast Guard type vessels, but it's certainly something that is safety based. I think that certainly there's opportunity here to look for grants to offset some of this, but he wanted to get this on this year's capital budget because it's way long overdue for that. He was going to be supplying information, just didn't have it in time for us to put it into this package that you have in front of you.
If I
Brad,
may,
just-
I've been out on that boat with him, and having worked in 2 other communities that have really active harbor masters, I'm impressed that they've been able to limp that boat along as long as they have. It is something that belongs in a parade, to be perfectly honest with you. And the forklift is something that belongs in one of those, yards where you go and visit really old antique
Right.
equipment, and there's probably only one person down there that even knows how to operate that thing without being afraid of it. They really are long overdue, both of these pieces of equipment, and it's impressive that they've been able to get the number of years out of these that they have been.
I'm sold. I'm going to recommend it.
Yep, so moved.
Okay, I would, before we vote though, I would ask of either Maria or Mike, since there is no form in our package, could we just get the form at some point that makes the justification and explains why the boat needs to be acquired?
Yes, I will have Will submit a much more detailed request with.
And if there's any background information on how the price was spec'd and that kind of thing would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so we have a recommendation and a second. Anyone nay?
I'm not necessarily a nay, Fred, but I'd love to kind of defer this one until we get the full amount of information, just so we know what the financial package on the new boat looks like and disposal of the other equipment. But if I'm the only one that I'm willing to go along with my peers.
I don't like that it's just been, this big number's just been dropped. We never have seen it before. And we're in this COVID period where we're trying to, as best we can, minimize commitments, at least until we're over the horizon here. It's just a very big number.
Brad, if I may
Yes.
add to this, I don't ever recall any kind of large equipment request from the harbor master. So I think Mike did do a great job with his budgets. He didn't spend much. And I don't think that this is an unreasonable request. You just said that you haven't seen something this large from this department in a while. And to me, that's proof that they need it. So I don't
Sounds
think
like
that
they're
this is
overdue.
unreasonable, whether you have a sheet on it or not.
All right, Stephen changed my mind. I'll be in with you.
There was no request from the harbor last year at all. So I'm inclined to agree with Stephen on this, but I would like, we can change our minds, but so I'd like to see where the numbers came from and whatnot. But all things being equal, I would agree that we should just go ahead and
All right,
say yes.
Fred, I'm in.
Unless it turns out that, somebody's selling 100,000 boats for 200,000, which I doubt, we might as well just assume that the harbor master knows what he's doing.
The last time I got towed in at night, there were no lights on the harbor master boat, so any upgrade is fine with me.
That can't be good. So again, if anyone is opposed to this motion, please say so. Otherwise, okay, then it's 8-0 to approve. So being mindful of the time, we're at about 8:30. We've got the DPW, which is quite extensive. We're not going to be covering the school tonight because the school doesn't have any information yet, and they won't till our next meeting.
Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt. You voted for the, did you vote for the package for both the forklift and the
Yes.
boat?
Yes,
Included in that.
Sorry.
yes, we're approving the marina budget as presented. There is an open question per their form that they list the forklift as 4 $15,000 items and 160,000 in the spreadsheet, but I'm assuming that that's an accounting kind of issue, that maybe I assume they're not going to spend 15,000 a year to buy a $60,000 item.
No, I'll get a clarification on both these pieces of equipment.
Okay. I'd like to try to get through the DPW budget because I think a lot of it we already voted on last year. And it's as it was last year, it's broken up into sections. There is the big equipment and then there's the facilities. And you'll notice that an awful lot of the facilities are pushed out beyond 2022. So I think we can probably do this. And certainly take a shot. I mentioned before that I spoke to Mark Vincent earlier today, and I know Mike and Maria have as well. A couple of points really quickly that he stressed. The $150,000 for the backhoe, which was in the budget last year, will likely be reimbursed via a grant. We won't know that at this point, but his expectation is that it will, that it's coming back via a grant that we'll probably see the year after. At least the payment will be a year after. The number 22 trans station roll-off truck, line item 33, the justification for buying that truck is, and this is an issue that is complex. It's the question of how the transfer station works in general. We are now single stream. We are theoretically going back to dual stream. We may go back to pay as you throw at some point. And I know that Maria and Mark are working through the financials of that to figure out where the potential revenues are and costs and so on. But the justification, as I understood it from line 33, was that we spend a lot of money hiring haulers, paying haulers to take the trash away, and that this would enable us to do a fair amount of that ourselves and save a fair amount of money over time. So it is a cost mitigation purchase, if that makes sense. That the idea behind it is that you are allaying payments to other people by making a payment upfront to our own capability. If anybody has any questions about those, that's about as much as I can tell you, but under the DPW equipment, those are the two biggest items. The pickup truck was on the budget last year and it got deferred. Anybody have any thoughts, comments?
If this is all stuff that we've seen before and it's replacement that, that makes the transfer station happen, I'm ready to move it.
Under the equipment,
Under the equipment, 21, 22, and 33, the DPW equipment.
that's correct. Under those two headings, those are the two explanations for the big ticket items and there's nothing else in next year's budget. So I would entertain a motion to approve the equipment and transfer station components of the DPW.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so we approved that. Now we go down to facilities. The canopy,
To be determined. Oops.
yeah, go on, I'm sorry.
Those to be determined numbers, we kind of want to know what those are, right?
Right, and.
For the vehicle and the HVAC thing?
I agree with that.
We pushed back on things like the awning last year, and I think we also had a real question as to what was that guard shack. I mean, those are just things that I remember from last year.
And we reserved opinion on that part of the budget last year. What we said last year was the FinCom reserves opinion on line items 41 to 60, which are still roughly, well, it's now 38 to 59, including the transfer station guard shack, pending are getting more detail in the budget review, and that budget review being in January or February. I would be perfectly comfortable with us doing that. And you may notice, by the way, that a couple of the items for the recreation areas in Bakersfield, they were in the recreation budget last year, and we pushed back on them. They have somehow found their way to the DPW budget this year, where they didn't exist last year, and I don't know why they did, but they also represent a slightly higher number this year.
Yeah, Fred, I noticed that too. So the two things on this one is the to be determined. And again, following my theory about COVID-related things that aren't necessary at this point, the backstops and the bandstand awning replacement and the DPW budget. So I would want to probably push this off until we can have a representative of the DPW talk more in detail. about
That's fair, and I think it won't be at our next meeting, unless that works out, or I can get a written, well, no, I think we'd want to talk to Mark, so.
Also, Fred, I think it makes sense to have facility, even though it may seem like a recreation committee department expense, it really isn't. It's a town facility. So it being under the DPW, to me, makes more sense.
I agree with that, but.
So whoever did it, thank you.
So it sounds like we want to reserve our opinion on the DPW facilities set of line items, as we did last year.
Clearly,
And-
everything with the TBD for sure.
Well, I'm not going to go line by line and say,
Yeah,
we can't
I'm-
have an extensive conversation about the canopy.
I'm with you
and-
totally.
and-
Yeah.
So it's either we say yay or nay on the whole thing, and nay would mean we're just reserving our opinion.
Yep.
We're not rejecting it. I would welcome,
So moved.
Second,
okay, anyone who disagrees with reserving our opinion, please say so. Otherwise, it'll be 8-0 that we're going to reserve our opinion, as we did last year, until we can talk to a representative, presumably the department head of the DPW.
Is that for the entire DPW budget?
No, it's for the DPW facilities.
That's what I meant. Okay. just making
We've
notes.
recommended the equipment and transfer station budgets.
Got it. Thank you.
We're reserving our opinion on facilities. And finally, you have the DPW capital improvements. Mark said that, and I don't know, this is one of those deals where you either trust the experts or you don't, that the Keller's Corner area is in significant distress and needs work. That the $15,000 in 2022 is basically consulting engineering, basically. It's a study to figure out what has to be done and how it's going to be done. And then the 450,000 is a placeholder. It's not a real number. It is just a guesstimate of what it'll cost to actually do the work. So on the theory that it is actual work that needs to be done, or pending that consulting saying it's a $200,000 job or a $400,000 job, that we're really approving the 50,000 in effect. I
Plus,
would,
isn't this a project that has to be done? Doesn't it tie into that whole thing about if you have a catastrophic flood or something, the towns have
Correct.
to make sure that their revetments are all up to speed?
yes, yes, and of course, some of it's in the eye of the beholder. You know, what is,
Right.
what's distressed, but again, we do an awful lot of things where we make an educated guess that the experts know what they're talking about. And I certainly have no opinion one way or the other about
You
whether.
haven't,
water.
Mr. Chairman, if you're gonna have them come back and talk about facilities, you know, maybe have them talk about those two projects a little bit. I mean, I trust that they're projects that should go forward, but you know, you might feel more comfortable if they're able to maybe walk you through what the conditions are.
Are you talking about the capital improvements?
Yeah, both of the revetment projects.
Well, that's a call, right? That I would be inclined to go ahead and recommend, but if people feel that there's more information that we need to get that you feel would be useful, where you'd actually understand the argument one way or the other for the revetment work.
This is the engineering, right, that we're talking, just the engineering study.
Well, that's certainly true for line item 60. I don't know about the Duck Creek revetment. You know, it says engineering. So yes,
Engineering.
it is for engineering for both. Yes, it is.
So
Yeah, so
I think
I would move that we approve it,
I'll second.
both of them.
I would
Okay.
second you, Stephen, with that. 'cause
I got a
we know it
second
needs to
from-
be done. We heard, I think we had, I recall last year, we had quite an extensive look at the two revetment issues and I specifically remember Keller's Corners because I remember Linda saying, I don't know where that is.
Yeah, me too.
Look it
I'm
up.
still not sure
Thanks, yeah.
exactly, but I remember the map. So we have a proposal and a second to recommend line items 60 and 61, the DPW capital improvement budget. We will have the opportunity to review this in 2023 for the 450,000. If it goes forward, it's a different issue. Anybody opposed to the recommendation?
Can I ask this question?
Go ahead, Rob.
In the past, the migrating sand, the literal drift is west to east. It goes underneath the pier. They take a Bobcat and a couple of pieces of equipment from DPW. They truck it to Keller's Corner. They dump it there. It's a routine that it's just putting the sand back where it came from originally. So I'd like to hear what is wrong with that picture. And it's also tying in with the groins that apparently are full. And so the migrating sand is going up and over the groins now, which are supposed to slow the migrating literal drift of the sand. And it comes from Keller's Corner. It gets put back on Keller's Corner routinely. What is wrong with that picture and why is that not working anymore? Is what I'd like to hear.
You already have a motion on this, Fred?
Yeah,
I don't, so,
but since that was a point of information, I'm going to treat it as a point of information because
Right.
there is a separate, I was forwarded by Maria today, a separate capital improvement plan for looking at the groin issue, so to speak, which is not literally a capital plan, but it is a proposal to spend $20,000 to investigate, as I understand it, just what you just asked about, to improve or to alleviate the sand that that clogs up the area underneath the pier and so on.
Yeah.
So I think,
I think-
yeah, I'm sorry.
I think that the Keller Corner issue is also that the stormwater is not properly draining into the harbor and causing flooding in that area. I think that's one of the issues that they're really grappling with.
So I think it may be apples and oranges, Bob. I'm not sure because I'm not an engineer, but I think my guess is that the engineering on either one of those projects is going to help to resolve that question that you asked.
I would say to put the engineer, as long as he's being paid to look at both things and charge an extra $5 to put his 2 cents in with the groin
Cool.
issue.
Okay, and noted,
They're all connected.
and we're not going to be voting on that other thing tonight because it
Right.
isn't, first of all, it's not in the plan, and it's not really a proper capital request. It doesn't require equipment. So we have a proposal, we have a second. If anyone has a nay or would like to abstain, that's fine too. But I'd rather hear that than go through the yays. Bob, are you abstaining?
I'll abstain. I'll abstain.
Okay, so we have 701. Is that clear, Rebecca?
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. The last thing we're going to look at tonight, because we don't have the schools, and I'm told that we will have the school information by our meeting in November, per Mary Beth, is line item 64 under administration, a comprehensive permit tracking GIS system. I don't know what that is. So I'm going to defer to Maria and or Mike. What are we voting on there?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is basically a comprehensive e-permitting and tracking system that will connect to a GIS platform. As you probably know, most communities already have similar systems to this. Wellfleet's a bit behind the curve as when it comes to technology like this. And I think in light of what's happening in this COVID and post-COVID era, this is probably more needed now more than ever. It's a way in which we can do a lot of things online as far as permitting, as far as tracking projects, as far as the public having access to viewing the applications and also to applying for various permits, et cetera. This project is being looked at interdepartmentally. So it will be, that's what we mean by comprehensive, is that it's going to, encompass, the assessing department, health and conservation, building, anybody who actually is involved in the permitting process. It's still, this is still sort of being cooked, if I can use that term. We've applied for an IT grant through the state's Community Compact Program. Requested 200,000, quite frankly, which is the max you can request. We've also gotten $38,000 approved in this last budget to hire a consultant to do the preliminary research on this to determine what kind of system would be the right one for us and match it to our particular needs.
So it's still going, I'm sorry, it's still going through a specification phase then?
Yes. And so because it was just approved in this last budget, so we're still, that has not been gone out to bid. We haven't hired a consultant on this yet, but also we're in the middle of talking with the county. They may be able to offer us some insight on this, if not technical assistance itself, or you never know, there might even be some funding around for this. What I would recommend is that maybe if you're willing to defer this, we might have more information by your next meeting that maybe can give you more detailed on what this program's all about. And obviously these are big round numbers we're working with right now. So maybe we can get that down to a better number that we can show you what this really is all about. So that would be
at a minimum, it would be useful to know how much of that $100,000, if that's a real number or even close to a real number, is specifying or engineering the system and actually building it and implementing it. It'd also be useful to know what current costs the town incurs in doing permitting, whatever, are going to be replaced or supplanted by a more efficient digital system. Are we saving any money by not doing it the old way?
I can answer a little bit of that just from my past experience running a department that issued all the license permits and inspections for a community of about 24,000 people. Right now, you have folks that are using spreadsheets and sort of barely getting by on tracking permits, licenses, and inspections. And it's delaying permits being issued, businesses being open. There's, literally you have folks, dropping off pieces of paper where, everyone else in your other communities are able to accept permits online, and it's really an efficiency tool and something that provides you an opportunity to keep track of all of these records electronically into perpetuity rather than individual pieces of paper in filing cabinets. So I don't know that you will actually end up spending necessarily less money going forward, but you'll be able to do a much better job, because in some cases we're a little rough on, how we're actually doing that work. I mean, I've finally gotten some folks to track permits on a spreadsheet that literally just had piles of paper on their desk. So, with all of the different approvals that we get, if you have a system, for instance, if you got someone that does a major improvement on a home that should tie back into how the assessment is done on that property and whether or not you're capturing the revenue from that upgrade to the property, this does that more seamlessly because you're connecting everything associated with an address to a GIS system. We have literally no GIS capability that we're really utilizing. So this starts with a GIS platform, keeps track of individual properties and areas of town, and keeps track of the paperwork, because all the paperwork goes into the system. You don't end up with huge vaults and file cabinets full of paperwork that you might have missed whether someone's taxes should increase. So I'd encourage you to think positively of it, and let's see if we can get you some more information.
Yeah, I think it's useful to live in the 21st century whenever you can. So
it'd be a great leap forward into the 21st century for sure.
So I would, if no one has any objection, Mike has suggested he'll come back to the next meeting with more specific, detailed information. I think that makes sense. We'll have a little bit better sense of how the costs break down, and then we can go forward from there.
Just one question, Mike, when you come back, can you talk about how the data gets entered, the previous data gets entered into the new system, and what the cost of that might be?
Sure. Okay, thank you.
That's a great point, Ira, thanks.
So that is, unless I've missed something, that is and thank you very much, guys, for helping to be so efficient in getting through the capital plan in one session. It sets us up well for the next meeting. Even though we did leave a few things open, we can have a reasonable expectation, since one member of the public appeared last time, that we can actually have a public forum and do a little business at the same time. There were two other things I wanted to cover, and I hope, well, we'll see if they're brief. If they're not, we may have to defer. I had mentioned at the outset that there were some financial news relating to the town that's been going on, and I don't know how widely it's been disseminated or whether you're hearing rumors or anecdotes and whatever. And that was a big reason that I wanted Miriam and Mike to be able to speak to them. One of them is the cash flow, which Miriam spoke to before. The other, another is that there have been varying reports about the seasonal short flows in revenue. There was a report from the director of the beach department today that is at some variance to what was reported in September by Gene Ferrari and Miriam Spencer in another report that suggested we were short about $521,000 $451, 375,000 of which came from the beach fund. And there are arguments to be made that it was because Whitecrest was closed for, parking fees and so on. But today's numbers look more like 120,000. So I'd asked Mike if he knew why the numbers had changed from 375 to about 125 in a month. So I'm going to throw that out there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Fred, I got that question too late to get an answer. I did email Suzanne to ask her that question, and she thought that number was thrown out by Mike DeVasto, but the fact that it's an actual number on a sheet tells me that number came somewhere else. And I don't have the answer to that. Unfortunately, Miriam's no longer on the line with us. She might have been able to, but why don't we get you that answer?
And actually, I can speak to that because Miriam said she would not be comfortable speaking to those kinds of numbers because it's more of an accounting question. And she's created, I think, an appropriate firewall between her role and the accounting role. And the other, I think a piece of information that dovetails with this, I assume everybody knows that the town accountant was let go. And so one of the questions I think for
Excuse me, his contract was not renewed.
Correct. His contract was not renewed. But what that does is it creates a gap in our accounting role at the moment so that questions like this can float. And from a finance committee perspective, well, there's a lot of potential questions that evolve from how we fill the accounting role. But one of them is if we are in fact 500,000 or whatever the number is short, those numbers translate into next year's budget at some point and beyond. They start to hit the operations budget in much the same way that the ambulance fund got redirected. Shortfalls are shortfalls. And
So Fred, can I ask you a question? How does this relate to our role as a finance committee? What are you trying to determine here? Who said the right figure?
No, well, yes, I think it would be useful.
Okay,
to
so
know
what
the right figure
does that
is.
have to do with us?
We are going to go through a phase in a month or two, starting in December and through March, where we will be evaluating budgets. And those budgets will be contingent on the ability to pay, one, and on the guidance that's given to the department heads on how they should draw their budgets up, whether they need to be austerity budgets or normal Prop 2.5 type budgets. That's how it applies to us because we're going to have to evaluate the budgets based on the guidance given to the department heads, which I'm assuming will be based on the actual numbers that come off this season and what's available to pack.
Right, so the numbers you were just talking about aren't actual numbers. You're saying
No,
that
they
you
were
have one
presented-
figure here, one figure there, so I don't know.
No, they were presented as actual numbers, Stephen, and as
Okay.
recently as September 22nd. That the variance between the 2020 revenues and the 2021 revenues were 521,000 in the negative. So that was going to be presented to the select board as an actual number. They are being modified in real time. So that's really the question for Maria and Mike is just to kind of speak to their sense of how we will resolve those questions. It's not to put anybody's thumb screws on, it's just to say, this is a real financial issue for the town, is getting the right numbers so that we can go forward with real budgets. And that's the question. It's like, what's the status?
If I can, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
So one of the things that I sent you was from Suzanne, and it was showing the seasonal, so not fiscal year, but seasonal revenue from things that we consider seasonal that include, shellfish and beach parking. But, and the number that sticks out there, the difference between, last season and this season was 166,000. But the interesting part of that was the decision to not allow parking at Whitecrest Beach was one that, cost $200,000 in revenue.
Right.
So those sort of policy decisions translate into budget decisions. So, making sure that we have early conversations. And Suzanne and I spoke today about wanting to make sure that we address that parking at the beach issue in December so that we can get back to, what we expected before on that revenue stream. So they do sort of tie together, because if you've really got to balance the budget, we're gonna make the most mindful guesses about what revenue is going to be for things that are not related to property taxes and related to discretionary income in some cases. So they do sort of play into how much we can expect to be able to spend to balance, or how much we need to collect in to balance the budget. So the $166,161 was sort of her difference between last season and this season, $198,240 of which was lost revenue from White Crest Beach compared to last year.
Okay, thank you. So just to be clear, because I know we're coming up on 9 o'clock. The point in having the finance committee apprised of these kinds of things is not that, as Woody put it a couple of years ago, we're not a policy-making board. We are, as everybody knows, an advisory committee, but our advice is contingent to some degrees on how much information we have and what the basis was for those numbers, right? So introducing the subject now hopefully will give us a head start on understanding where we are in 2 or 3 months when we do have to meet with department heads and understand the budgets in the context of what the town is looking at from a financial perspective. So it wasn't to solve any problems tonight. It was just to get everybody up to speed on where we are to date, not trying to anticipate where we're going to be in 2 months.
And we did send to you fiscal year 2020 revenue.
Projections? Oh my God, thank you.
Fiscal year 2020 actuals, and then year to date fiscal 21. So last year's revenue, what we received, and where we are from July to now on revenues that we received. And that includes everything from what we collected from road races to dog licenses.
And thank you. And that raises one other point, which is there's a fine line between the finance committee being in lockstep with the select board and trying to find points of agreement, and then being an independent board and being the skeptic in the room to some degree. So we're always sort of playing that game to some degree, trying to figure out what our role is when we see something that we don't understand or don't agree with, making an informed recommendation that may be at odds with what the select board recommends. So thanks for sharing the information, and I hope this is the beginning of a long-standing participation of communicating and understanding the numbers. I'm going to suggest that there are no transfers, and I'm going to suggest we defer the liaison reports for tonight in the interest of getting everyone out now, basically. If anyone has any final points, questions, or concerns, this would be the time to express them. Otherwise, I would be happy to accept a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, I have to put money in the meter, so I'll make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Never heard an opposed. Thank you very much,
Thank
everyone,
you.
for your time.
Good night, everyone.
See you next
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.